When we say they are destroying koala habitat, they are really destroying it. And I credit you with this, Steve. You
Yes.
are the one that brought this to the world by bringing some footage that showed wind farms under construction at Caban and at Mount Emerald nearby. And that footage, it blows your mind when you see the amount of civil engineering work that's involved in the middle of native forests, chopping down half a hill, and that's no exaggeration in the case of the Caban wind farm. How do we get this message out there?
Well, by doing it on programs like this, but I think we just need to just ramp it up and go harder. And what we need to show to Australians is that there is a significant cost involved with renewables. And what we need to do is educate Australians about renewable energy. And I was very naive up until 3 years ago, very naive about renewable energy. I thought renewable energy would be going into cleared areas. I didn't really understand the capacity factors of renewable energy and the amount of infrastructure that you need to try to replace some of the coal plants and thermal plants that we have in Australia. So what we need to do is go on this journey and educate Australians that to replace one coal plant, like the Stanwell power plant in Rockhampton, for example, we need something like 20 huge big wind farms consisting of 50 to 100 wind turbines per farm. I don't really like calling them wind farms. I prefer to call them wind factories. But even then, the entire network will need to be backed up by gas. And then the other issue is connecting all these wind factories with high voltage transmission infrastructure, which involves clearing even more forests and the fragmentation of more forests. And it's not just necessarily the clearing of the forests, it's the fragmentation. It's pushing roads into what are, at the moment, wilderness areas, places that are inaccessible, remote and wild. That's why things like koalas have existed in these areas, because they are so remote. And these roads are being punched into these inaccessible areas and opening up these inaccessible areas to weed infestations and feral animals and feral species, and also to altered fire regimes. We're going to see more fires as these roads are punched into wild areas. So what we need to do is educate Australians that renewable energy projects need to have a lot of space. They consist of a huge spatial footprint, and we need a lot of it across the country, and it all needs to be connected with very expensive high voltage transmission lines, which means that power prices can really never realistically come down, because half of your electricity costs that you get for your residential home, half of that cost is transmission infrastructure. And that transmission infrastructure will have to be doubled, if not tripled. And Chris Bowen has indicated we need 28,000 kilometres of new transmission infrastructure across Australia. And that cost is going to be borne by electricity users, by mums and dads across the country. So the cost of renewable energy is going to be very, very expensive, and we need to educate Australians about that. And there are alternatives. And I was very against nuclear energy, but it wasn't until I put all my ideology aside, I looked at the maths around renewables and what's required, and I had to look at nuclear energy again with fresh eyes and look at the data and the facts. And the facts indicate that nuclear energy is really going to be one of our solutions. And I'm a nuclear advocate, and I think that is a part of the solution.
Good on you, Steve. Let's hope the Minister, she has a chance to redeem herself to some extent. She has the application for the Chalumban wind turbine development on her desk. We've brought that to everybody's attention on recent episodes of Battleground. I've been up there, you took me round. Let's just hope she'll do the right thing on that, because there's more koala territory at risk there, plus a whole lot of other really sensitive biodiversity, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing that we failed to mention is actually the aesthetic splendour of these hills and mountains.
Yeah.
And like I'm a photographer, and so I see everything in a very in a way that I see beauty and I look for beauty. And it breaks my heart to think that a lot of these hills and mountains, once they're smashed to smithereens for these turbines, they can never come back. And this is an argument by the pro-renewable industry, is that, oh, well, you know, the country can grow back. Well, it can't, because entire mountain ridgelines and mountain tops are actually completely annihilated. They're blown apart. Sometimes even TNT is used to blow the tops off these mountains, and they can't be regenerated or revegetated. So by approving these wind farms, it is a permanent legacy for future generations, and a lot of these mountains and ridgelines will be altered forever. And that's another thing that we really need to consider as well.